All right, welcome into today's show. I am Kurt, your host of the show, and we are joined today by Randall Bowman with Deep South Smokers. They are located in Cumming, Georgia. Randall, thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to join you. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. So let's talk about the journey into competitive barbecue. So you've been competing for a while now. You started a smoker company years ago. So I'm sure that this is an interesting story about your journey into all of this. So take us back. How did this all start?
Oh gosh. Well, barbecue has been part of my life forever anyway, from family gatherings on Sundays. Growing up in the South, Sunday dinner was always kind of a tradition anyway for many generations gathering, and in-laws and cousins and second cousins and a whole gaggle of folks gathering on Sundays. Pigs in the ground on 4th of July and Memorial Day weekends, and smokehouses to cure your own bacon and ham and things like that. My father actually grew up, on a fifth generation farm in North Georgia. So all that history of, canning and the smokehouse and all that kind of stuff has been part of my life forever. Um, we, uh, we cooked our first contest in, I want to say 1998 was the first contest we cooked. It was a non-sanctioned little local thing. We ventured into sanctioned stuff in about 2003 is when we kind of got more serious about competing. Um, we got to the point competing where we were cooking 20, 25 weekends a year. That's slowed down a lot over the last couple of years as kids have grown and life gets in the way, and with business and all we've dealt with in the world the last couple of years has made it interesting, to say the least. But we'll probably cook 6 or 7 times this year. We kind of a little more selective now. We choose destinations that we haven't been to that we want to go to, or contests that we've always supported, whether we've sponsored them or we do a lot of stuff with Kids Q. I do a lot of sponsorship of Kids Q because I really believe that next generation it's just one, it's marketing for us, but I can't even begin to express how great it is to see a 5, 6, 7 year old grilling a hamburger or hot dog or something, and then you get an email a couple years later that they're still using the grill you gave them, and that they've developed this passion for cooking. Because to me, that's really the coolest thing in the world. And of course, my kids, both my boys, grew up in barbecue, and our best friends, my wife and I's best friends are barbecue folks. So
I love that. Well, I hope my two boys will follow a similar path. They've shown a lot of interest lately. Switching gears, though, you touched on the business side of things, and for our listeners, take a moment to check out Randall's website. That's deepsouthsmokers.com. So as Randall talked about, he got his start competing, but then kind of shifted things a little bit, and Deep South Smokers was born. So let's chat about that. Let's camp out on that for a bit. What was the journey like there?
Oh gosh, well, I was very fortunate early on in life to be fairly successful and got in a position where I kind of worked when I wanted to and was able to do things I wanted to do and not have to go do a 9 to 5 and make sure that paycheck was there every Friday. We started doing food vending and events and catering and just kind of dabbling in that along with competing. And I looked at Jamie Gear and Jambo Pitts and always admired the craftsmanship and thought, man, I don't understand why other niches and other lines of cookers like gravity feds, nobody's doing that type of quality. It was shocking to me that hadn't, and I kind of saw a market for that. So we built a few, did some R&D and some other things, and cooked on them ourselves. And then somebody wanted one, and a family member wanted one. It just kind of grew from there. The first person outside of us that cooked in competition barbecue was in 2012, and that was the very first cooker we let another team use. And they, out of the gate, scored a 704 and granted the first contest they cooked on it. And it just kind of grew from there. I mean, you can't ask for much more than that.
Right.
From a team anyway. And back in 2012, 700s were not nearly as common as they are now. Not that they're super common, but a 655 or a 660 could grant a KCBS contest, back in 2012. And now you've got to be in that 690, 695, 700 range to even be in the ballpark.
Yeah, and for our listeners, just to give you some context there. So what Randall's referring to is, in the KCBS and the Kansas City Barbecue Society world, 700 is the pinnacle, if you will. That's the summit, that you want to reach as a competitive barbecue cooker. And so, it's interesting to hear that, you've got that entrepreneurial spirit. It sounds like you took, you looked at what was out there. You looked at another company that you felt like was building quality products. And you said, you know what, I think we can build our own products to fit the standard that we want. So I think that's really, really neat to hear that. And you also mentioned another phrase too, which is gravity feed or gravity fed. And again, for our listeners, we've talked about this several times on the show. And I was connected to Randall because I bought a Deep South smoker. I'm the third owner of it. And so I can tell you how great they cook because I cooked some brisket on there this past weekend, actually, for the long holiday weekend. So, shifting gears back to the competition space, though, you mentioned, years ago, it was very rare to see, 700s. Now you're seeing them quite frequently. Where do you think that shift? What's caused that shift in your mind?
Well, I think there's a lot of variables to it, but I'll be honest. Back then too, there was not a lot of information. There were only a few cooks that taught classes, and that was even a rarity. Mike Davis taught some classes with a lot of bull, and Rod Gray was teaching some classes back then. Bubba Latimer with BBQ taught a few classes, but it was not a common thing to have classes like we do now. And of course, the age of technology. As much as I hate to say it, a guy has such a jump start just going on YouTube and, Googling competition pork butt or how to trim competition chicken or those things. There's so much information out there because, we didn't really even have backyard contests when I started. It was kind of, you just jump in with both feet and try your best and see where it goes. But I will say, the barbecue family too was always great because as much as you want to hear your own name called in a contest, it's also great to hear your buddy's name called. And we would share recipes and trade secrets back and forth. And Thursday night around the fire pit was always the big fish stories and the sharing of information that, we all just wanted to succeed and enjoy the hobby together. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, it's to me, the information out there too is not even on the competition side, but the information that's available for the homeowner, for the guy who just wants to cook Memorial Day weekend for his family, the products available. The quality of the products out there now, because there were no injections, there were no commercially produced injections, and now you've got. I can probably name 10 right now that people are winning contests successfully with every weekend. Same thing with sauces and rubs and gadgets and power draft control devices didn't exist back then. You were manually controlling every pit you did, or hair blowers and hair dryers and leaf blowers, whatever else you could come up with that would help you. You would try to find some trick to get you over the top. So.
Right. Well, I think you touched on a great point, and that is the information age that we are in. YouTube, Google, there's so many different ways that you can at least get a basic understanding. Of course, you still have to go out there in the real world and execute. And, I've heard this so many times. I've only cooked 12 or 13 professional competitions, but I've heard it so many times that really you win or you lose in the last 10 or 15 minutes prior to turn-in. That's what I keep hearing over and over and over again. And so it sounds like you're in agreement with that.
Oh yes, that last 10 or 15 minutes is where it's made or broken. I've seen some really awful cooks really get saved in the last 10, 15 minutes, and I've seen some really good cooks get really messed up in the last 10 or 15 minutes.
Sure.
So yeah, it definitely is. I think there's a lot of ways to get from A to B, but it's that wrapping up bead before you turn in competition barbecue that the finishing few minutes is what makes the big difference.
That's right. So in the smoker world, I'm guessing 20 years ago there wasn't as many options as there are now. Just like you talked about, there wasn't any injections, there weren't as many sauces and rubs, et cetera. So it can be overwhelming. And if I'm looking at this just as someone that wants to, whether I want to get into competition or whether I just want to up my game at the house, from your point of view, as I'm going down this path, what are some of those key variables, key questions that I need to be asking myself when I'm evaluating, all right, am I going with a gravity feed? Am I going with an offset? Am I going with a pellet grill? What are some of those things you think that they should be asking themselves?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that every style of cooker is good. I'm not going to tell you that one's better than the other. I listened to Kerry Chastain's interview with you. I think it was last week, and he is dead spot on when he says it doesn't matter what you cook on; you have to learn the cooker. And I've seen it so many times over the years where somebody will win a really big contest, and all of a sudden that's the smoker everybody wants to buy. And it's like I think that's the secret. There is no magic pill. If you look at really, really good cooks, I guarantee you they could cook on just about any cooker and be successful because they know how to cook. Um, Melissa Cookson is a prime example. She took two Deep South smokers for the very first time, unseasoned, brand new, never had cooked on one, to Memphis in May and cooked whole hog.
Wow.
She finished sixth overall, and I think was 400th of a point from making finals.
Wow.
So, her and her husband Pete know how to cook. Heath Riles the same way. He can take a brand new cooker, go to a contest and cook because he knows what to look for and knows how to overcome variables. I think when you're looking for a cooker, you have to ask yourself of what features you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
If you look in the offset world, you've got reverse flows and you've got direct flows and you've got insulated fireboxes, non-insulated fireboxes, and they're all good. They're just different. Reverse flow is going to take a little more wood because you got to get the BTUs to make the circle and come back. Insulated firebox is going to take a little less wood than a direct flow offset. But you're still feeding wood every 30 or 45 minutes. It's just whether you're feeding one stick or 10 sticks. Gravity feds are the same way. The more insulation, the thicker the steel, the more efficient they're going to be. Mm-hmm. Now, there's also variables in that because sometimes burning more gets you more smoke flavor. You got to learn the tricks with every unit to get what you want. Pellet cookers are great for what they are. They're like I said, everything's just different. Drums are huge right now. There's some really successful guys out there cooking on drums, and we've seen this in the years I've been doing this, where drums will get popular for a few years, and then water cookers will get popular for a few years, and gravity feds get really popular, and then offsets, and it just kind of goes in waves. And like I said, they're all good. You just have to learn how to cook, and unfortunately, in a contest, we're not necessarily cooking for what you like or what I like. We're cooking for what scores well. And I'll be this is going to sound a little brutal, but I'm not a big fan of what we turn in for contest cooking anyway. Right. I think the chicken is way too sweet. I think the ribs are way too sweet. I think the brisket is just false flavor. I don't think it's, I tell you a story. I was in Florida probably 10, 12 years ago with Bubba Latimer, and we were cooking next to some young fraternity guys from Texas. And they were hyped. They were so hyped and so excited. And they wanted us to sample their brisket. And man, it was great. I would eat that all day long. And Bubba looked at him and said, "It's not going to score worth crap." And they said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Because this is not what they want." And they were towards the bottom of the list. But after I talked to him, I said, "Don't get discouraged, because I'm telling you, it was great." And for cooking for your friends and cooking on I'd eat that all day long, but it's not what they're looking for. And those flavor profiles of what judges looking for have changed over time. As much as I also don't really like to say it, there's one extremely popular sauce out there that was kind of the only go-to sauce for many years.
Mm-hmm.
We used to joke that I bet every trailer on the contest site has at least one jar of that in their trailer. And so many of the sauces that have come out since then just are very close mimic copies of that sauce. So I mean, but that's what judges score. They score it well, so that's what gets used. I'd love to see a mustard sauce score well, or a white sauce score well, but it just, you may get a one judge that loves it, but the other five are going to ding you.
And it sounds like, I've never been to judge training. It almost sounds like that is maybe, baked into the training, so to speak, that, you look for the sweet, heat, savory type of thing. Again, I'm ignorant on that particular issue because I've never been to judge training, but that's just the gist I get.
I think I don't know that I've been to a few judge train classes. I don't know that it's specifically trained that way, but when you look at John Q. Public and the average person, sweet is an appealing flavor, and savory, and because the other thing too is it is good with a little bit of heat on the back end, but if it's too much, you can turn people off. Because one of the problems with barbecue judging, no matter what the sanctioning body is, it's subjective. Because you cannot teach a person what is the right level of spice, because spicy to me may be sweet to you, and vice versa. So you can't teach. I mean, it's just impossible to teach some of that, and it's heartbreaking to me to see people go on the internet and bash judges that, I turned in the best food and I hit this table of death and all these other things. And the problem is, it's subjective, and you have to go into that knowing that your flavor profile may be great to your taste buds, but that doesn't mean it is to all six of those people on the table if it's a KCBS sanctioning body, or five if it's a WFC, or depending on the sanctioning body. So it varies, and sometimes it varies where you go in the country. Some people will change things and some people won't, depending on where they're cooking. But good food is good food. And the problem is you got to find that middle of the road that's not, people want to talk about wow factor when it comes to competition barbecue. And that's great if you want to score really well 1 out of 10 contests, because you'll hit that table that loves it and it's wow. But these guys that are consistent have found this flavor profile that is pleasing to the masses, in judges. And that's why they can go from California to Florida and score well. They cook it till it's tender, until it's done, and the flavors are not overpowering or underpowering.
Right. Not to mention that those folks that are traveling coast to coast are likely cooking, 35, 40 plus competitions a year. So they're getting a lot of practice.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that certainly helps.
There is a lot to be said about the consistency and the ability to be consistent when you're cooking more. Our best years were when we were cooking 20 to 25 weekends a year, because it became routine. I mean, I'll cook 5 or 6 now, and I'll still have to go back and look at notes and think, now, wait a minute, what I do last time? Because things change through the season too. So it varies. And unless you're cooking all the time and you're taking it very serious, you have to look at it like it's a hobby, and you have to look at enjoying the Thursday nights and having the kids out with you and the family and camaraderie with friends, and look at it like that. Because if anybody gets into this thinking they're going to become rich and famous, cooking ribs in a parking lot, I think they probably ought to reevaluate what they're doing.
They're going to be very disappointed. All right. So
yeah.
I want to go back. Go ahead.
We've run a whole bunch of events too. And I tell you, I used to joke with some of the new guys, and I'd say the worst thing that can happen is you hear your name called tomorrow, because you'll be on your phone looking at trailers and smokers and ordering every gadget you can find, before you even get home. And it's true, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just funny how this hobby kind of sinks the line in and hooks them and reels them right in, and they get knee deep before they realize it.
Well, you're talking to somebody actually right now that did exactly that. So, I definitely know from experience that it's a very deep rabbit hole, and it's like a lot of things in this world. It's like any other hobby or pastime. there are plenty of groups, plenty of things to buy, plenty of gadgets, accessories, all that fun stuff, but I love it. I mean,
Sure.
and you do as well, clearly.
Sure. Well, and I'll tell you, one of the reasons we really kind of gravitated towards gravity feds was because I was originally a truly low and slow guy. I would put meat on at 8 o'clock that evening, and then I could go to bed, and I'd get the same amount of sleep at a contest that I do, during the normal week.
Mhm.
And I still do some things low and slow, and then we do a very kind of variety of hot and fast and some other things. But um, we play around with stuff all the time. I don't cook enough to be consistent, so I play around and try new things almost every time I cook now, just to enjoy it and have fun and see what works. Um, and we do a lot of playing around with cookers we're building too, just to see overcome different scenarios and play around at contests and in a real setting, so we can actually know what we need to change on units and what works and what doesn't. So, but gravity feds for me were, uh, for lack of a better term, they're about as dummy proof as you can get,
Mhm.
because you can light a fire and you can set a power draft control device. Your fire management's done. You don't have anything else to worry about. And then you can worry about flavor profiles and whether you're adding wood at this time or where you're setting sauce and when you're spritzing and all those other things. Because to me, I look at guys cooking on exclusively drums, and if you look at a 4 meat contest, you're running 4 drums, which is 4 fires. You're managing 4 fires, all naturally aspirated. I don't want to work that hard. I mean, to me, that's not fun. Um, I like to be able to set the power draft control device and walk away and know that when my pork butts hit that 165, 168 range, the color's going to be right and I can wrap them and finish them up.
That's exactly right. So I'm glad you brought up the drums again, because I wanted to go back to that. And you mentioned earlier that it is kind of the new trend, I guess, if you will. It's the hot and fast trend. You talked about earlier how, you have a couple big teams that do really well. And then all of a sudden, everybody wants to have a drum or a water smoker or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But now you recently, and I say recently, within the last year or two, recently came out with an answer to the drum in the mailbox, correct?
Well, I do. I like drums, for what they are. I truly do. The one thing I didn't like about drums was the capacity, and accessibility. So what we did was we built basically a rectangle, uh, you know, drum. It's basically based on drum technology, but they've got 3 racks you can access easily. There's a door in the front to access the 2 bottom racks and the top lid to the top. It works as a grill or a smoker. You can do low and slow, hot and fast. The racks are 19 by 23, so you've still got some really good capacity. In fact, I'm going to cook a KCBS contest this weekend on 1 mailbox, just to show people it can be done. Now, as long as my timelines hit okay,
Right.
if I have a problem, that may be another issue. but I love the drums. The drawback to our drum is it's heavier than the traditional 55-gallon UDSs, which is what they are, and there's a lot of people making them now.
Right.
And I'll give shout out to Tim Shear with Gateway Drums. He also owns a Blues Hog, but when he really came out and started cooking with his brand of Gateway Drums, and started being successful, it knocked competition barbecue on its rear end. And a lot of people saw him, and he won Memphis in May on a morphed giant drum basically this year, cooking whole hog, which nobody ever cooked whole hog hot and fast. That's crazy. Who would do that? Well, they hog, and I think it's 8 or 9 hours. So I mean, it's crazy, but it obviously works. So and to me that just shows there is no, you have to do A, B, and C, and that's the only way you can do it. Guys like that are what makes this industry grow, because you know what, you can go low and slow, you can go hot and fast, you can go both and in between and all the above, and you can do it on any style cooker. And like we said earlier, there's pros and cons to every style cooker.
Sure.
Cooking hot and fast, your window of error is a whole lot smaller. You got to be much more careful with things because you can overcook real quick.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's something that I've had to learn the hard way. I heard a great quote recently, which went something like to the effect of, you learn how to cook barbecue by making bad barbecue. So,
I agree. I agree.
yeah.
The mistakes you make are where you learn. That's true.
So where do you see the competition barbecue world, the smoker world, all things barbecue? Where do you see this going? Right. We talked about the transition, from the late 90s. So we talked about this transition that you saw over the last 20 years or so. Just in your opinion, what do you see happening over the next 10, 15 years in the competition world?
Well, I have kind of mixed views on competition. I think we've seen kind of a downturn in some competitions. Like here in Georgia alone, I want to say it was probably 2011, 2012, 13, somewhere in that range. We had probably 25 KCBS contests in Georgia.
Wow.
And I think we'll have 8, 9 this year, maybe 10 at most. Um, and that was the pre-pandemic stuff as things were starting to go down. But when we had Barbecue Pitmasters air on TV, that got a lot of general public interested.
Sure.
But we've kind of been our own worst enemy when it came to competition barbecue because everybody wants to do the best they can. So if you can afford to buy a gold Wagyu brisket, you're going to buy a gold Wagyu brisket. If you can afford heritage breed pork, you're going to get heritage breed pork.
Right.
An air chilled organic chicken and all the other things that come along with it comes with a price tag. And unfortunately, all those things are going much higher now than ever. And now with fuel going where it is too, I think that competition barbecue for the rest of this year is probably going to be a little slim. But at the same time, to me, the big part of barbecue is what you do at home. Even these competition guys that are going to take a break because it's too expensive, they're still going to cook at home.
Right.
Gonna, maybe not buy the Wagyu brisket. They're going to go to a wholesale club and buy Choice or a Prime and cook, which there's nothing wrong with. I mean, we cook Choice and Prime at home all the time.
Right.
And to me, that's traditional barbecue is that, crappy, cheap cut of meat and turn it into something that's a delicacy.
Turn it into a work of art. And I love what you said about, bringing the family together, breaking bread together around the table. That's to me, that's one of the best things about barbecue, not just competition, but just barbecue in general, is it has that, when I think of barbecue, I think of people coming together, building those relationships, actually talking to one another, not on their phone, not on a social media app or something like that. That's what I love about it. And then going to the contest, like you said earlier, it's that big barbecue family. You're cheering for the guy next to you. You want to see them do well. I mean, I just think it's a really, really cool atmosphere.
I used to joke that competition barbecue was the only place you could see a grown man hug each other on Thursday when they just saw each other Sunday, which is it's very true. I mean, and like I said earlier too, my wife and I, our best friends are we met in barbecue. Our kids grew up together. I mean, they're grown and driving and doing their own stuff now, but they at 3 and 4 years old, they were out scavenging around contest sites, with each other. So it's been an incredible experience to be part of, and I hope that continues for many generations. Which, like I said earlier, also that's one of the reasons we do the Kids Cube, because I see what it did for my kids being involved. I hope that the next generations can be part of that. I love what the high school barbecue associations that are kicking off. There's 3 or 4 of them in various parts of the country. Tom Tilley here in Georgia has done he's been cooking. He's had a high school team for years. Really, honestly, before most of these high school barbecue associations started, Tom had, a barbecue club at Tallulah Falls School. And he's done some great jobs with kids. teaching them something new, and hopefully a skill set they can take home and grow as they become parents and have kids and grandkids and everything else. That's something they can keep handing down generation to generation, and the love and passion that comes with, as you said, breaking bread as a family is. I mean, how many great memories does anybody have about a Christmas meal together, or Thanksgiving meal together, or Fourth of July cookouts? Or I mean, I bet most people, if they look back at memories growing up, it was around some kind of gathering that involved food, um, or something that pertained to that where a meal was served. So I mean, it's how many business deals are done around a meal? I mean, it's ingrained in our human nature.
Amen to that. I love it. I wish I didn't love barbecue so much. My waist might be a little smaller, but it is what it is. You take the good with the bad. And again, for our listeners, I'm chatting with Randall Bowman with Deep South Smokers. Take some time, check out his website, deepsouthsmokers.com. They also are on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I recently saw you guys do some videos on TikTok, so check them out there. So as we wind down, Randall, any parting words of wisdom for our listeners from your side of the table?
Honestly, I will kind of reiterate what Carrie said last week, and that is when you want to get into barbecue, learn what you're cooking on. It doesn't matter if you've got a $10,000 smoker or a $20 smoker that you built yourself.
Hmm.
You learn how it works and how it operates. You can put out good product and enjoy it. Have fun with it. Don't be afraid if you're going into the contest world. Don't be afraid to ask questions to people, because you'll find that they'll be pretty open with you and honest and help steer you in the right direction. But ask questions. I mean, communication to me is the key at everything anyway. So I look back at when we were starting and the friendships we made, and I probably would have quit after, one or two contests, being discouraged, if I hadn't had some help and a pat on the back and some guidance. So, because it's different. I mean, it's different than cooking, a pork butt at home for pulled pork sandwiches. What you're cooking in a contest is a different animal. So, it's good to talk to those guys that have been around and that are experienced. I mean, I go to contests now and I feel like I'm the oldest guy there, because half of the teams I don't recognize anymore, and and they're cooking 40 and 50 weekends a year, and it's like I don't know half of their names now because I've just not been around like they are.
That's right. That's a powerful way to end the show. Randall, thanks again for the time. Enjoy the conversation, sir.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.